It's that time, Dolphins fans. It is NFL roster cut down day. By 3 p.m. Eastern time, we will have a Miami Dolphins 53-man roster. And prior to that, with all of the cuts that came in on Monday, I am going to give y'all my final Dolphins 53-man roster projection. Let's hope that I do a good job. But make sure you are subscribed and make sure you turn on notifications because we will have the full 53-man roster for Miami when it is officially released later today. So subscribe and turn on notifications because as soon as it is official, we'll be filming a video to let y'all know the news. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss it. Quarterbacks, there are no surprise here. It was always going to be Tua Tagovailoa, Zach Wilson, and Quinn Ewers. There's really not much to talk about here. You have your QB1, you have your backup that you gave money to in free agency, and you have your QB3 that's a developmental guy. Just expect this season for Ewers to be a technical inactive but emergency third quarterback for every game Miami plays this season. Moving over to the running backs, we're going to keep 4. They cut Mike Boone and Aaron Shamklin on Monday, signifying Achane, Ollie Gordon, and Jaylen Wright are your 3 backs. Now, I will add this, though, with you having the ability to elevate players to the practice or from practice squad to the game day roster, expect Miami to invest that running back on the P squad with Jaylen Wright and Achane banged up. We reported yesterday that Jaylen Wright is not going to be able to be playing in week 1 against the Colts. That's at least what Mike McDaniel said. But at least as of right now, he is not expected to go on IR. That can change. McDaniel lies a lot to the media about injuries this time of year. And we know Achane's going to be ready to roll, but that still just puts Achane and Ollie Gordon as your 2 healthy backs for week 1. You're not going to go into a regular season game with only 2 backs available on the roster. There will be a third one, and since Wright won't be healthy, there's going to be another one, whether it's on the 53-man and they make a different move down the line or elevate someone from the practice squad. Moving over to the wide receiver room, this has been solidified for me for a while now, and it does stink that we are not going to be able to keep Theo Weiss Jr. in all likelihood, but we all know the top 4 wide receivers are Waddle, Hill, Malik, and Nic Westbrook-Ikhine. I said about a week ago that Dee Eskridge solidified himself as wide receiver 5. And then as we just continue to see Tahj Washington put together good joint practices and good preseason performances, he solidified himself as wide receiver 6. And it does hurt me to cut Theo Weiss Jr. And I even contemplated maybe even keeping 7 wide receivers on my projection and skipping out at a different position later on defense. We'll kind of show why I didn't do that. But I do expect him to return to the practice squad, assuming no one claims him. I do believe there is a small chance a team claims Theo Weiss Jr. with how good he did look, especially in that second preseason game against the Lions. But if he goes unclaimed on the waiver wire, he'll be back in Miami on the practice squad for sure. And I hope the same thing can be said for another UDFA wide receiver out of Arkansas, Andrew Armstrong, the 6'4" wide receivers. Didn't put that much together in the preseason for Miami, which is why I don't think he'll be claimed. But I would make about 2 or 3 roster spots for Dolphins wide receivers when it comes to the practice squad. So Theo Weiss Jr., I would want him on the P squad. Andrew Armstrong, I want on the P squad. And I would even consider keeping A.J. Henning on the practice squad as well. I'd keep those 3 on your 17-man Dolphins practice squad. But let me know your thoughts. Take Chris Grier's job for the moment. Would you guys keep Theo Weiss and Andrew Armstrong on the practice squad? Type Y for yes or type N for no. We're going to move over to tight end here where we're keeping 3, Darren Waller, Julian Hill, and Tanner Conner. Now, this decision was made a lot easier for me when they released Pharaoh Brown on Monday. I thought that was a little bit of a surprise, but he did not have a good camp or preseason. So it doesn't shock me he got released, but considering he was signed to be one of these top inline blocking tight ends, it did stun me a little bit. And you're not probably going to keep Hayden Rucci. He's a really good blocking tight end, but I would be floored if he ultimately makes the 53-man roster. So I do expect Miami to look to the waiver wire to potentially add a tight end. Keep an eye on a guy like Jaheim Bell, who was waived by the Patriots, 7th-round pick from the 2024 draft. I'll be looking at other teams on roster cutdown day on who doesn't make rosters from the tight end room. We know there really isn't that many good free agents available, but if a good, solid tight end gets waived today, well, I'd be looking at him on waivers Wednesday afternoon. Moving to the trenches on the offensive line, I'm keeping 8. There just isn't enough worthy guys to be kept, in my opinion. You have your starting 5 and Paul Savianaya, Brewer, Daniels, and Austin Jackson. Your top offensive tackle depth piece in Larry Borom. Daniel Brunskill is probably your top interior offensive lineman, with Liam Eichenberg and Andrew Meyer not healthy, ready to go to start the season. And then Keon Smith, even though he had the worst preseason game I've ever seen in week 1 against the Bears, did have 2 solid performances against the Lions and the Jags to close out the preseason, probably solidifying himself as the last offensive lineman kept. There was some thought for me keeping Braden Daniels, but I felt I don't need another interior guy with Daniel Brunskill still here. So I would rather keep a versatile guy in Keon Smith, an interior offensive lineman in Brunskill, and then your swing tackle being Larry Borom. But this is another position that I would like to add to in the waiver wire or free agency. There is an outside chance Kendall Lamb gets cut from the Philadelphia Eagles after they made a couple offensive lineman trades. If he gets released, I could see Miami trying to create a reunion there, because I thought he was solid last year as a swing tackle for Miami. Offensive tackle depth is necessary for this ball club. Keep an eye on the Dolphins being active, because I do not like the depth Miami has currently on their roster, which is why I'm only keeping 3 backup guys. I see them adding outside the current group. Got the defense coming up here in a second, but get started with PrizePicks today, the daily fantasy sports platform I play every day and every week during the football season. It's so easy. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. College football. Week 0 was last week. Week 1 is this week. I couldn't be more excited about it. But week 1 in professional football is just around the corner as well. I have a 3-player entry for week 1 of college football. I'm going less than on Haynes King passing yards. He's a mobile QB. I don't think they throw it that much against Colorado. I'll go less than Arch Manning passing touchdowns. Producer Coop doesn't agree with me, but I think he runs one in and throws one in. Still solid day, but I don't think he throws for 2 on the road against a vaunted Ohio State defense. But I'll go more than Deshaun Bishop rushing yards for Tennessee as they take on the Syracuse Orangemen. 61.5 is the total there. Join me and millions of others on PrizePicks. It's the best place to win cash while watching sports. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Going over to the trenches on the defensive side, I'm going to keep 6 defensive linemen. And this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I feel as if it might be worth it. Zach Sealer, Kenneth Grant, Benito Jones, and Jordan Phillips are all roster locks. The 4 of them are going to create a really great quartet at the defensive line. But I'm adding Zeke Biggers, the 7th rounder from Georgia Tech, because he showed me a lot of nice things in the final 2 preseason games with that wide, big frame. I'm also keeping Matthew Butler. The veteran has had a very solid camp, very solid preseason 3 games as well. Now, I think it is tough because if you're keeping 6 defensive linemen, I think it's a toss-up between him and Matt Dickerson. But I feel as if Biggers and Butler played well enough to justify keeping one of them. And I just didn't see another position worth keeping an extra player in, which is why I went with 6 interior defensive linemen. But I'm also going with 6 edges. I got Chop, Jalen, Chubb, and Judon. Talk about another really nice quartet there. We always knew there was going to be at least a 5th edge rusher. I have long projected to be Grayson Murphy. I'll stick with that projection. But based off where I have the Dolphins roster in the secondary, offensive line, and at tight end, I originally thought Miami would keep 4 tight end. Well, I have them keeping 3 after they released Pharaoh Brown, which allowed me to keep Quentin Bell as a 6th edge. And I'll prioritize talent over need. I know the depth on this O-line is not very good, so you could justify keeping 9 and not instead of 8. But I would rather keep a player like Quentin Bell or even Derek McClendon over one of those shitty offensive linemen that isn't very good. So I'm prioritizing Bell and Murphy. Bell played last year in a role for Miami, solid run edge setter, which is why I'd like to keep them as a depth piece. They deserve to be on this roster over a offensive lineman, which is why I'm keeping 6 edges and I'm keeping 6 defensive linemen. Make sure you are subscribed. I'll mention it again because we will have the full 53-man roster when it is announced later today. And we'll also have the full practice squad that gets announced usually later on Wednesday. Might not be fully announced, but you'll see some signings and some waiver claims come into the fold. Subscribe and stay up to date on a lot of news coming out in the next 24 to 48 hours. 4 linebackers, no surprise here. Sometimes Miami keeps 5, but I'm not going to do that. I just feel as if you have 4 solid linebackers in Brooks, Dodson, Gay Jr., and Britt, and all 4 of them are healthy, ready to go for the start of the season. So there's really no need to keep a 5th, in my opinion. If they had 1 banged up and 1 slightly injured, 5 would probably be smarter, whether it be Tyndall or Eugene Asante. That's not the case. I feel as confident with this group and position group out of any position group on this Dolphins roster. Keeping 5 cornerbacks, and I have long projected 6 of them throughout the offseason and training camp. But with Mike Hilton being released on Monday, I feel like these 5 are your guys. Storm Duck's a starter. Jack Jones is a starter. Jason Marshall Jr. is a starter. And I only have 2 guys being kept for depth. Cam Smith, who actually put together 2 really good preseason games. And then I'm keeping Ethan Bonner, who has a lot of familiarity in this Dolphin scheme. I don't think Isaiah Johnson is going to be kept. I do not think Kendall Sheffield is going to be kept. I don't think Kendall Sheffield is very good whatsoever, and he's a little bit banged up right now. I don't forecast Cornell Armstrong being kept, and if he does, I think that's a bit of a joke. I don't think he's good at all. And with Mike Hilton being gone, that's kind of where I see things headed. Maybe I'm wrong, and the Dolphins keep one of Sheffield or a Cornell Armstrong over one of those defensive linemen, but I would rather have the trenches than the secondary. 5 safeties being kept on the initial 53-man. Obviously, Minka, Iafatu Melifonwu, Elijah Campbell are locks. I'm going Dante Trader Jr., who, I'll be honest, has not really done anything to deserve being kept on this 53-man roster other than being a 5th-round pick. He hasn't really participated in any games. He really hasn't participated in any practices. He's been injured the entire offseason. But I just have a hard time seeing Chris Grier releasing a 5th-round pick before he even has a chance to make a debut in the NFL. And I'm keeping McMorris, too. And I'll be honest, that was one of my toughest calls. I know that Miami's going to keep 5 safeties, but I didn't know if they were going to go with Jordan Colbert or Patrick McMorris. I know a lot of beat reporters out there have kept Colbert over McMorris. I just think that Grier might value his own 6th-round pick from 2024 higher than Colbert. Is that a good thing? Maybe not, but I feel as if that is how Grier is going to make his decision, which is why I have McMorris on the 53-man over Jordan Colbert. And then 3 special teams guys. Jason Sanders is your kicker, Joe Cardona as your long snapper, and Jake Bailey won the punting job. Now, I will make this note now. Jason Sanders is obviously going to miss the start of the season, as we discussed on yesterday's show. But he is going to miss probably the first 3 weeks of the year. And you are allowed to keep a kicker or elevate someone from the practice squad to the game day roster 3 times throughout the season. So assuming the timeline of Sanders being out 4 to 5 weeks lines up, you are going to probably see a kicker get signed to the practice squad, be elevated for week 1 against the Colts, week 2 against the Patriots, week 3 against the Bills, and then hopefully Sanders is ready to roll week 4 against the Jets, which is where he makes his season debut. All right, you added up. That's 53 players. That is my initial 53-man and final roster projection. Grade it for me. A, B, C, D, or F. A in terms of, okay, you think I'm going 53 for 53. B, maybe a couple misses. F would have to be like 8 misses, which I actually think would borderline be impossible. Some other players I wanted to note. Remember, you get 2 players that you could put on IR to start the season, but aren't done for the season, eligible to come back after the first 4 games of the season. I believe safety Ashton Davis will be one of them. I think Andrew Meyer, the backup interior offensive lineman, will be one of them. And then Liam Eichenberg will remain on the PUP list, which means you have to miss at least the first 4 games of the year, but he was never taken off the PUP list, and he was put on the PUP list before the training camp started. So I think these 3 players are technically going to be with the Dolphins, but they do not count against Miami's 53-man roster. And I did mention already the kicker situation a little bit earlier when talking about special teams. So just be on the lookout for a kicker to be on the practice squad and be elevated for the first 3 weeks of the year. Kicker that I'm keeping an eye on is Michael Badgley. The Badger is a guy that I would really like to add to this roster. But the Dolphins will ultimately fill out their practice squad and announce their 53-man roster later today. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and be on the lookout for that. And I'll see you later today with that video. Go Fins.